Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to talk all about externalities and public goods. On this slide, you can see a breakdown of all the different things that we'll talk about. Externalities specifically are going to be third-party problems. This is when the internal cost or benefit is not necessarily equal to the social cost or benefit. And we'll also talk about positive versus negative externalities. We'll also talk about ways to correct externalities, as well as property rights, public goods, private goods, common resources, and club goods. So something that's interesting to think about, what would be the optimal level of pollution? And the answer to that is 0. Now, when we say that the optimal level is 0, is that something that is necessarily realistic? And the answer here is not really. We can't necessarily have zero pollution, and it's not because we don't care or we just don't want to get there. It's that pollution is one of those negative externalities of a lot of the processes that we use in our day-to-day life. So the actual question that we have to ask ourselves is, how much pollution can we actually live with? Because pollution is one of those externalities. So externalities are the costs or benefits of a market activity that affect a third party, and market failure occurs when there's an inefficient allocation of resources in a market. Think about a paper producer dumping chemicals into a river. There's two parties that are involved here in this transaction of buying paper. We have the buyer, who's the consumer, and the seller, that's the producer. If the dumping doesn't occur, these are the only two parties involved in the transaction. But if the producer is dumping, then others are affected. Anybody that wants to use the river for boating or swimming or fishing. So when the paper producer is deciding how much they're going to produce or what price they should charge, they're probably not thinking of those people that want to use the river for those kind of recreational activities. There are a lot of times when market activities actually provide a benefit unknowingly to a third party. If you live in an apartment complex and you were to purchase a fire extinguisher, the main parties involved are you, the consumer, and the producer of that fire extinguisher. However, your neighbors do actually also benefit from this purchase. If you were to have a small fire, you put it out before it spreads to other apartments. But whenever you're making your decision about buying that fire extinguisher and what price you're willing to pay, you're not necessarily thinking about your neighbors. You're thinking about how this is going to benefit you and what it's worth to you personally. These are examples of both a positive and a negative externality, and we'll talk about those a little bit more later. Now, with market failures, we know that these occur whenever there's an inefficient allocation of resources in the market. And what that means is that whenever our market is at equilibrium, our total surplus is maximized. We talked about this in an earlier chapter. And this happens when markets are functioning well. But sometimes this isn't always the case. In the case of externalities, buyers and sellers aren't really considering all the costs and benefits of their actions when they make decisions. And this leads to an inefficient outcome. Externalities are one type of market failure, and another type, called public goods, will be talked about in a later video. So with externalities, we have our internal, external, and social costs. Internal costs are the cost of a market activity paid only by an individual participant. These are things like the cost of materials, labor, energy, and so on that are involved in the production of a particular product paid for by the producer. External costs are the cost of an activity imposed on people not participating in the market. So in our paper company dumping water or dumping chemicals into the water example, this would be the cost that was imposed on boaters, swimmers, and so on. And then social costs are the sum of internal costs and external costs of a market activity. The next thing that we're going to talk about is a third-party problem. So an externality exists whenever the internal cost does not equal the social cost, and the internal benefit does not equal the social benefit. Third-party problems occur when those not directly involved in a market activity are going to experience either a positive or a negative externality. So, what are positive and negative externalities? Negative externalities are going to be cost experienced by third parties. And in this case, too much of the good is consumed and produced. Positive externalities are going to be benefits that are experienced by third parties when not enough of the good is produced or consumed. So, with a negative externality, think about the firm dumping in a river, imposing costs on third parties. Another example could be somebody wearing too much cologne or body spray, or noise near an airport or a busy highway, being sick and coughing on somebody, or leaning the airplane seat back into the area of the row behind you. Positive externalities could be things like the person that bought the fire extinguisher for their apartment, or getting the flu or any other vaccine, growing a flower garden, getting educated, driving a hybrid. These are all examples of actions that cause some benefits to third parties. So here's a practice what you know question. Which of the following activities would most likely create a negative externality? The correct answer here is smoking a cigarette. It's likely that if there were people standing near you, they may experience that unpleasant smell, or if they have asthma, experience discomfort, while the other items on the list are not necessarily likely to cause a negative externality. And on the other end of that, which of the following is most likely to create a positive externality? And the correct answer here is getting a college degree. When you become educated, it's likely that that will not only benefit you, but it will cause benefits to third parties. That's going to be where we wrap up this video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I'll talk with you in the next one. Thank you.